Well, good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar presentation entitled, What Does It Mean to Be a Black Masculine Man? My name is Dr. Tashina Reeder, and I am the director of the Community Health Training Alliance, and I'm excited to have you with us today for a thought-provoking and challenging conversation we will have with an amazing panelist of men. But before we get started, I have a few housekeeping tips to run over with you. The chat box below has been disabled. And so any questions that you may have or concerns, please place them in the Q&A box below. We will answer all of your questions at the end of today's presentation. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass this presentation over to our moderator for the day, Tiara Neal.
Great morning, everybody. I'm so excited about this opportunity to talk to this panel of gentlemen who are all brilliant. They're scholars, they're activists, they're whatever they are in the intersections of their lives, and they'll share a little bit about who they are and a little bit. Last week, we talked a little bit about Bell Hooks' work, a lot of bit about Bell Hooks' work. And Bell Hooks seemed to be one of those under the radar activists, authors, scholars, that a lot of folk kind of didn't know about. And we know in our community, we kind of pay homage to people once they pass away. And I don't like it, but that's just my honesty, right? So while we're in this space today, I invite you to go grab a cup of coffee, some water, kick back, relax. And I do believe what we'll hear this morning into afternoon will be some things that will help to shape and change our perspective, that will enliven the work that we're doing in the Black community. Not just the Black community, but just to integrate activism in all of our communities, quite honestly. So I just want to share this really quick, and then I'll shift over to the panelists to introduce themselves. One particular individual, a Black man scholar, talked about Bell Hooks' work. And he said, when I think of Bell Hooks, I think of love. I think of a gut-wrenching, soul-stirring, chin-checking love. The kind of love for self and people that can rewrite, reshape, and re-examine the history of a people, our people. When I think of Bell Hooks, I think of a mirror being held ever so rightly toward a future. A mirror held up to each other, a reflection of a language that we will spend years unpacking. Bell Hooks allowed us to feel free in our expression of Blackness, of love, shifting power dynamics in a way that was both palatable and also emboldening. Bell Hooks never pandered. She never withered in her stance. Bell never made us feel smaller. We were greater than any sum of parts, the parts that whiteness wanted to give us because of Bell. We were giants because of Bell, and her work lives on. And so as we unpack some of what it means to be a Black masculine male in this panel, we will be interacting with some of the themes that Bell shared around love, around masculinity, around white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal society, and what that means. And so without further ado, I'm going to ask our panelists to share this morning, and however you all want to jump in, please jump in, and I'm super excited to hear from you.
I'll jump in. I know these gentlemen aren't shy, so they were just being respectful to each other. So, and I was doing the same, but I'm Dr. Gene Wright, and it is a pleasure to be with you today. I'm not going to give you my resume. You can read that. I was speaking at an event on Saturday and then one yesterday to a group of Black women, and then a separate group of sort of a mixed group. And the one theme that I would like to leave with you in terms of my introduction of myself today is that we are not necessarily what we do. And so my resume is not who I am. My resume is evidence of my why. And so I would invite all the listeners and speakers and all of us that are coming together today as family to remind yourself of your why. I was 12 years old when I decided to be a clinical and forensic psychologist. And everything that has happened since then has ended up and a very long bio, CV, resume, and I thank the divine for that. But only it just came because of the why. And so what I would share with you is that just for practical purposes, I am a adjunct professor at Temple University. And one of the things I love about this opportunity is that I get to teach young people to follow their why. And so that is a wonderful thing. And know all these gentlemen to some degree, some better than others. And so thank you for having me. And I will pass it to my good friend, Kempis Gane Songster.
Thank you, Doc. It's always an honor and a pleasure to hold space with you, and pleased to meet everybody here and to be able to, take a deep dive into these critical issues. Peace and light and love to everybody tuned in here today and everyone else out there negotiating the twists and turns of life while trying to do right by people. Thank you, Philadelphia Fight, for appreciating the importance of this conversation and then pulling us all together to have it. Much gratitude to Assata Thomas and Dr. Rita for your visionary leadership, and just salutes to everybody. Like Dr. Wright, I won't get into my bio or anything like that. I would only say that I'm not here as an expert on anything. I'm probably the least qualified person on this panel. I'm only here as a person that had a journey that was impacted by, toxic masculinity, mindset, behaviors, that was consequential to myself and to others. December 28th that just passed marked my 4th year back out into the wide open world after 30 plus years of imprisonment that began at the age of 15 for me. And I, after long years of self-reflection, and study and self-examination and self-criticism, I'm proud to say that I've identified toxic masculinity, misconceptions of what it is to be a man, right? As part of the reasons why I ended up where I ended up, right? And so with that, I'll just pass it on to Uweri. Is it Uweri, brother? Am I pronouncing it right? Uweri?
Aware Asiande. And I too am very happy and pleased to be here with all of you, my esteemed brothers, whom I have tremendous respect for, given the good work that you are all doing in our community. Also want to give my thanks and appreciation to Philadelphia Fight for the invitation to come and share and talk about our dear sister and her influence on all of us. I wrote an essay very recently, simply titled, Bell Hooks Saved Me. Without question, her truth, her words, her criticism has had an indelible mark on my journey as a man, as an African-American man in this society. And, I know we're going to, take a deep, as I say in my work, we're going to jump in on the deep side of the pool, as we should. The times that we're living in demand us to be more honest, more thoughtful, and to not just speak from the head, but also to share from the heart. And so with that, I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you.
I'll go next. Jeffrey Haskins. I am a lifelong activist who has been in various different movements, starting from civil rights movement up to and with my mother in the feminist movement, to an arts movement. And in the arts movement is where I met Bell Hooks in person at a live production that my organization I was with put on, where it was a women's reading, and it was 3 phenomenal authors, and with Essence Vogue magazine, sorry. Marsha Gillespie was with Vogue at that time. And Bell Hooks was one whose was a mentor in a way because I, as a writer, am finishing my own book of poetry and prose. And she opened my eyes to how Black men must support Black women with the kind of sexism. And also, as a Black gay man living with HIV, she really made me deal with my internalized homophobia, which I didn't know I had until Auntie Bell kind of just said, "Hey boy, come over here and let me talk to you." So with that, I definitely wanted to be part of this panel.
That's so good. The snaps to all of you all. You're dope in every intersection and you are qualified from where you stand, right? So I think a part of this context, right, with me being a woman on a panel with you all asking these questions, is just the interaction with all of your intersections. We're in this space having this dialogue around Belle's work, but there's also a ton of us that would like to explore and uncover some of our own internalized patriarchal, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic contributors to, how we continue in our own community to perpetuate what we've learned or been socialized to embrace. But more also on a lighter note, what is it like to be in interaction with a Black man, as a Black woman, as a Black man, right? What does that feel like? What does love feel like? I am a lover of Black men. I support the Black men in my life. I lift the Black men in my life, scholar, theologian, whatever, right? Sometimes none of that even matters when you're sitting heart to heart having conversations with your spouse, your brother, your whatever, right? And there's some things, one of my friends said to me, "You will never understand what it means to be a Black man or how to hold me." And the conversation from my standpoint is we try, right? We try, but you won't let us in. So what is it like, if you could share, to be a Black man in American society, just from a surface standpoint, before we start digging in? What is it like for you to be a Black man in this society?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think I'll answer it this way. In 2004, I believe it was, I was fortunate to fly to Brazil to my cousin, who's an international recognized artist over there, invited me, and I went and landed in, I believe it was Rio de Janeiro. When I got off the plane, for the first time in my life, I was not just a Black man. I was a man. And I can't explain it. The air was different. The looks, the eye contact was different. It was palpable, the change in at that time, 40 some years I had lived as a Black man in America and had never felt the sense of being looked at and viewed for who I was. I had always been invisible in America as a Black man. And I knew it, and you grow up and you figure it out, you deal with it, you interject where you can, you insert yourself where you can, you learn the norms and the rules so that you stay alive, that your grandmother and your mom and your dad tell you when you leave the house because they want you to come back home. So certain things you have to learn. I grew up in a rural Ohio German village where our family was the only African-American family for most of my life. And when I put all those thoughts together, I guess I would end my answer with this. With all of that focused on being a Black man, it wasn't until I took a womanist class, which I'm still in, and I've taken several now, where I was introduced to some of the authors that I'm sure Jeffrey is familiar with in terms of, his personal contact with bell hooks. I'm sure he's aware of, of some of the others. For the first time in my life, and I was appreciative of the space, brothers, because most of the people in the class were women. It's being taught by an African-American woman professor. And they allowed me to say, for the first time in my life, I realized I was privileged. Getting to Bell's patriarchy and how she described it and how the wominists described it and all the readings that I'm getting. And now even as I read the Bible, it's so obvious what she's talking about. And so I thought I knew what being a Black man in America was till I went to Brazil and was just a man. And then I thought of the burden of being a Black man in America until I realized being a man in America is privilege. And so when I read Bell, you know, after she beat me all upside my head with love,
Yeah.
I recognize how little I know about being a Black man in this world, in this country, because I've had to wear so many hats that I thought made me a Black man, based on the model of good Black men models, but also being socialized in a racist society. No wonder I was confused. And so everything that I've become and everything that I've done and everything that I am is now in question, because Bell has educated me. And sometimes education can be painful, but the wounds can be healed. And so I'll stop there.
I think, Doctor, you hit on some of the good things about, I know too, I feel invisible as a Black man in America. And I feel invisible because I have to deal with homophobia, discrimination, stigma, stress, identity, lifestyle, and now aging. You know, in your mid 60s, you know, you have to deal with so much. I too have gone to Brazil, and you know, Rio de Janeiro is a great place. But when I went to Bahia with the Candomblé,
yes, went there too.
When because I am gay and proud of being gay, there was all of the different things of our Black culture in that Candomblé faith. I am also clergy here in ministry, but you know, even that has everything I've been in life for 66 years has had limitation, and you got to fit in the box. And I'm not the kind that's going to fit in a square box. I'm broad, I'm open, and I'm always for adventure. So a lot of people have problems with me with my identification. So in America, I am constantly educating on the spot of who I am, because you know what? It changes from moment to moment. There are times when I have to deal with my trauma that is imposed by this country. I have to deal with police. I've gone to Colombia. I've been thrown up against the wall on Broadway. I've been in theater. I've been in business. I've been in church. And I've always got to deal with prejudice, no matter where I go. And it wears on the soul and my mental health. Thank God for Philadelphia Fight. And that I got therapy when I was a client. And as a former employee, I got lifted up by the people that I've worked with. But thank God for the students that I've taught who have also taught me in return. And thank God for a sense of community where I felt accepted. And that was Bell saying to us, and you know, I'll go further in it in some of the other questions with some of her works, but that, I mean, there would be no other countries Black gay men writing without Kitchen Press. The women came first and got their books out, you know, and they were lesbian women. I mean, there would be none if it wasn't for the women, you know, who, and womanist theology. Let me just say, you know, there'd be no Jesus without Mary.
Watch out.
So let me just say, there'd be without Martha and the rest of the ladies that You know, there's the lost books of women who wrote chapters in scripture, and we ain't even talking about them. That hierarchy, male top, woman bottom, not doing it no more. So I'll pass it on to Brother Kempis.
Thank you. And definitely big ups on that, Brother Jeffrey. And I was thinking about, when you were talking, Dr. Wright, it resonated me in a way that made me think of my own life and how it actually runs on the flip side of what you were talking about. And in reverse, whereas, you said, you were unseen in America, and then you went to Brazil and you were seen and you felt totally different. On the flip side, I was born in Trinidad and Tobago, in 1972. And I didn't have a concept of being like a distinct race. You dig what I'm saying? Black, you know what I mean? The country was predominantly people of color. Everybody. The prime minister at the time was Eric Williams, who was the president the very first president in the country when it freed itself from British colonialism. You know what I'm saying? And and my teachers, the doctors, everybody that I saw in positions of authority, looked like my family members. You dig what I'm saying? And so I didn't have any concept of distinctness until, 1979, when I came to the US at the age of 7. Then, I started to see that I was different. You know what I'm saying? Over the years, I guess where you said, Doc, you were invisible over there and then you felt more visible when you went somewhere else. I actually felt more visible over here, but for all the wrong reasons and all the wrong, you know what I'm saying? I was visible in the wrong way. Not my humanity wasn't visible, you know what I'm saying? But my phenotype was visible. You understand what I'm saying? And even still, I was naive to it, of course, as a child, all the way up to the age of 15, not really knowing that or being able to identify or articulate the hand that was rocking my cradle. You understand what I'm saying? It was only after all was lost, you know what I'm saying? It was too damn late. And I'm sitting in a prison cell, in a private, filthy prison cell to my own thoughts and self-accusing spirit, sitting on the edge of a bunk bed in a thinking man's position, asking myself, how the hell did I get in this situation? You know what I'm saying? And with my mother's very first visit to me, bringing 3 books with her: the autobiography of Malcolm X, the autobiography of Nelson Mandela, and Kafir Boy by Mark Mathabani. You know what I'm saying? That would set me on a path to a voracious appetite in me for knowledge, you know what I'm saying, and deep reflection. And then I would start to get some clarity on the hand that was rocking my cradle. You know what I'm saying? And I was able to see how I became different once I came over here. I had no concept of race or racism in Trinidad and Tobago. You know what I mean? And so I guess life for me as a Black man, and I became Black over here, and I learned over the years that Black is a political construct, political and social construct, just like white is. And white is a construct that confers power, and Black is a construct over here that's meant to, keep us disempowered. You know what I mean? And I came to terms with that. Even to this day, 4 years after being released, I'm still having problems getting in an apartment. You dig what I'm saying? Not just because of my case, but because I'm in that permanent caste system that Michelle Alexander so thoroughly articulated. And so, my life as a Black man has been one of being very visible, you know what I'm saying, for all the wrong reasons, right? My humanity being made invisible though, right? And me having to work extra hard, you know what I'm saying, just to get the same things that other people have, you know what I mean? And I'll just stop there and pass it on to Iweri.
Thank you, brothers. Thank you. For me, being a Black man, it is impossible for me to separate who I understand myself to be as a Black man from the influence of Black women in my life. So with respect to the way you posed the question at the outset, certainly we are all familiar with, the way in which this society has caused us or challenges us as Black men to want to believe that there's no way that can relate to what we're going through. But that is clearly a misnomer. It was my mother at the age of 6 who sat me down after I came running back into the house from the backyard playing, because I saw what appeared to be a fire in the field distance away. It happened to be cross burning. And, I got the white hairs my brothers do, but, we're not talking about 1950s America. We're not talking about the Deep South. I was born and raised in South Jersey. And, it was that experience that was the pivotal shaping moment in my life that was thankfully defined by my mother, a Black woman, who sat me down and explained to me the situation in terms of who I am as a Black man and how this society was going to view me from henceforward, and what I needed to have as a walking awareness of how society is going to look at me and treat me as a consequence. With respect to what Brother Ghani shared, thank you, brother, for letting us know about where you're from and how you came to this country. You mentioned Brother Eric Williams, and Brother Eric Williams was the author of Capitalism and Slavery. The seminal work with respect to what now in our society is being tapped around, the critical race theory and the whole controversies around that. Brother Williams' work makes very clear that we're not dealing with a theory. We are dealing with the fact of history. And that as a consequence of that history, we still are struggling to understand ourselves, because we were once objects. We were once that material that enabled these white folk, as you mentioned, to have that wealth, to have that power. There is no whiteness as it is understood as a political construct outside the understanding of that Blackness is meant to produce for white the power and wealth that they hold. And Brother Williams' work makes that very clear. Brother Haskins, what you shared about, again, the critical role that women played in the scriptures, as often we get preachers in the pulpit who want to act like there is no feminine influence with respect to the Trinity, and thus want to personify that patriarchy and how they go about ministry. Again, for me, it is truly a circumstance that, if we want to speak from a place of prescription, my journey as a Black man has been very introspective. The lessons that we've been taught in our homes, what we've witnessed often in our communities, has been, to put it nicely, debilitating. And so, when we consider the ways in which both this society teaches us how to treat ourselves, let alone the women in our community, how those messages are often reinforced by others in our community. There is no escaping that self-critique Brother Ghani spoke to, if we are to escape from. I know that the theme for our talk is Black masculinity, and my fundamental belief, based on Hoax's and others' teachings, is that the state and condition of Black masculinity is a flawed condition, and we see the evidence of that every day. In addition to all the other things that I could speak to, I'll end this part of my comment with all the other titles I hold. I am first and foremost the father of 2 young Black men. And so for me, part of being a Black man in this society is to be ever concerned for their safety, as a consequence for the safety of my fellow young men and women. And so I walk with a super awareness of who I am and how the society views me and others like me.
Wow.
Almost a
I'm
hypervigilance.
sorry, Campus, did you have something you wanted to share?
No, I just no, a word just popped in my head as my brother just said, super awareness. I'm wondering if that's just a euphemism for hypervigilance, That's all. It just popped in my head. I didn't have any statement beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, we know that hypervigilance is a response to trauma, right? So, when you look at, and we don't want to talk about pathologies for a long time, but, when you look at some of the symptoms, and Joy DeGlory Leary's work, she talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome, it was kind of slapped away as an evidence-based model to look at trauma in the Black community, but it's very valid, right? I mean, we see the hypervigilance, we see the unwarranted depression, we see retreat, we see all kinds of things that could connect to clinical forms of trauma, connected to how our collective looks when it comes to the essence of how we show up. But I just want to take a moment just to offer some lightness. What is the brilliance about being a Black man? You guys spoke to, how American society tends to itemize the parts of your existence that, gets you stopped by the cops, makes you look invisible. And I think women take the opportunity to say Black girl magic, right? So let's talk a little bit about Black boy joy, Black male joy. What is the brilliance about being a Black man in this society? Just a little snippet of that.
Oh, see, I gotta jump on this one quickly. And first, for me, there is no other entity, if you will, however you want to explain it, that I would rather be in this world. When we look at you name the genre of life or the way in which one can exist on this planet, Black men bring such excellence, such dedication and devotion. I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, I'm an educator. So for me, my lane is, all I gotta do is Frederick Douglass, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X. These are my heroes. And for me, there are no better examples of what is required of a person and what can happen when a person devotes themselves to a cause, to a mission, to their own development in every circumstance. And of course, I would also, given my political bent, throw in Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. That when we look at the scholarship, the intellect, that which I would dare say, white men or white patriarchy, masculinity has sought to attack us most vehemently, has been our intellect. You cannot read Douglass written during slavery, working during slavery. You cannot read Dr. King, you cannot read Malcolm X and not see and be moved by their brilliance. And so for me, my Black boy joy is evident there. They are my heroes, they are my example, and they represent the litmus of what can be attained when one is devoted to one's own development. I'll pass it on to Brother Jeffrey.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Yuan. I hear that, but what for me is Black man's resilience. They have tried to kill us. They have tried to stop us. They have tried to threaten us. They have tried to emasculate us. And I am talking about the patriarchy of white male. And I am talking about colonialism, and I'm talking about those things. They are so afraid of us that they have done everything they can do. And even the just attack the Capitol. We need to stop it, because even attack Barack Obama as the first Black president of the United States. Every one of us that is first, we're the target. It's a circle and a point. And there's a bullet. It doesn't matter if it's a bullet or arrow or a knife. But we have our own tools. And I think I learned from the civil rights movement with being there and doing that work with my parents, that, you know what, nonviolence is the catalyst of love, you know, and what they're doing to keep us down is hate. And for me, love trump hate, you know. And so in this Trumpism area, and it's still going on, Black men, Black Lives Matter, all of us together, I feel that for Black men, the joy is inclusion. The joy is in family. The joy is, come on, y'all, all to the table. Let's work together to make a change. I think I live by that. I practice that. And I act as an activist, I preach it whenever I can. And I'm gonna pass that on to Dr. Gene, my mentor.
Thank you, Brother Jeffrey, and thank you,
You're
Brother
welcome.
Urari. You know, I was sitting here listening to y'all, and the joy welled up in my soul and my heart listening to you. The joy of being a Black man does override any of the negativity that I get from society because of that family that that Brother Jeffrey spoke of, and the Black women in my family. And I say this when I say they're strong. I certainly sometimes that's used against women of color, you know. And if you read Shaniqua Walker Barnes, she talks about that in terms of the strong Black women. She puts it all together, one word, strong Black women, and what that does to some of our women. And so, but what I've seen, the talent that Brother Urari spoke to, and the brilliance, and he mentioned a few of the writers. You know, Jeffrey could have mentioned many of the playwrights and the entertainers, and just the brilliance of creativity and wit. You know, and so for me, putting that all together, I think my Black man joy is being able to walk into a barbershop, something simple, walk into a barbershop and immediately know you in the right place. The old heads is talking, they drop in knowledge, they know some things. You know, they may not have a bunch of degrees and all that. Some of them do, some of them don't. But what they have is wisdom. And the joy and the love with which they dispatch it, oh my goodness. And I look and I see, and I see the little heads waiting as their daddies, you know, like Brother Uriah has two male children, takes them to the barbershop, and that introduction, that rite of passage, if you will, of being in the grown man's barbershop, waiting your turn. I remember being that little boy and my daddy taking me to the barbershop, you know, and listening. You know, it's the one place where you wasn't too young. You didn't have to, you know, because I remember Thanksgiving, it took a while before I graduated to the grown-ups table. You know, I was, you know, you sit at the kids table for a long time. You got too much family at the house, you know what I mean? You over there with the kids table, and you hope you get to the grown-up table. When in the barbershop, there's no hierarchy. The little kids are sitting around, they listening to the pearls of wisdom that the older men are sharing. And that just brought back a memory listening to Jeffrey and Brother Uriah in terms of just acceptance of family, of brilliance. I tell you, some of the smartest men I ever met were sitting in that barbershop. Some of the smartest men I ever met were at Graterford Prison. Some of the smartest men I ever met would not have been identified as such by the white supremacist, racist, patriarchal culture that we grew up in. And so my Black man joy is recognizing the brilliance, the joy, the talent, the creativity of Black men in all spaces. And we do fill all spaces. When a Black man walks in the room, he feels that space. He fills the space. Brother Gotti?
What did you brothers even leave me to talk about? You know, and my brother Jeffrey, he took my joint. I was going to say that our brilliance is in our resilience, but no, there's we could talk all day about, you know, the beauty of being a Black man or an African descended man. And for me, it's in our capacity for redemption, our drive for restoration, right? That's indomitable, right? And our inclination to always find ways to recalibrate with each other and get things right and get back on our perpendicular, get back on our square, because we're so deeply flawed, right? We've picked up some very, very counterproductive, self-destructive and deleterious habits, you know, throughout our sojourn in America, through slavery. We came over here with bad habits, some of us, because we weren't perfect. You know, let's not get that, you know what I'm saying? But when we got together, you know, we held each other accountable. You know, you spoke about Malcolm, you spoke about Frederick Douglass, you spoke about Martin. You know, they held us accountable. You know what I'm saying? They helped us recalibrate ourselves, those brothers. You know, you didn't mention all our, you know, so many giants, you know, our CLR James and our George Padmores and, you know, our George Jacksons, you know, our Francis Clare Drake, our John Henry Clarks, you know what I'm saying? You know, some of that, we are, you know, have always been on a passionate quest for excellence as a people, you know, and as men, you know, I remember Ivan Van Sertima was saying one time that, you know, when he took a trip to Egypt, he said a lot of people, you know, they were interested in seeing the pyramids, as, you know, rightfully so, but he was interested in seeing this obelisk that he had been hearing about. And the obelisk was 3/4 of the way done, right? It wasn't damaged, it was just incomplete. And the story behind the obelisk based on the hieroglyphs was that the builders, when they had almost got done building it, they had noticed a slight mathematical miscalculation. Now it may have taken centuries or maybe millennia, if ever, to have made a difference. That's how slight the miscalculation was, but they abandoned the operation because it had to be right. Right. And so it's not the actual edifices or the pyramids or, you know, these things that we all throughout, you know, our ancestral world, you know, the physical things, you know what I'm saying, we marvel at, but the mentality, the spirit of the people, you know what I'm saying, that went behind it. And the men, you know, too, you know, which was, you know, a passionate quest for excellence, right? And although that's been kind of like contaminated and diluted over our experience in the US, and we see it, you know, the way we behave, you know, the way we've been contaminated by toxic masculinity, the way our young people, you know, is destroying each other out there in the streets. But when we get an opportunity to get around each other, right, in those barbershops, right, on those cell blocks, right, like we did on those barns or in those bushes, right, when we ran away from the plantations, right, when we got a chance to get around each other, away from all the noise, when we could hear our own thoughts and hear each other, right, we held each other accountable. You know, we said to each other, look, we can be better than this, right? The seeds that our mothers planted in us and our grandmothers planted in us would come up. It would come to the surface, right? And we'd get it together. And so it's our capacity for transformation, our capacity for redemption, for recalibration, that I find, you know, just so hopeful and inspiring. And as long as we have that, that's that palm tree, right? Not necessarily the oak, but the palm tree. And that's what we get from our mothers, right? The ability to bend and bend and bend in the wind, almost till your crown touched the ground, right? But when it passed, you know, we swing right back up. You dig what I'm saying? That's the capacity for redemption, for recalibration and restoration and making things right. You know, once we never lose that, you know, we might be beaten back here. You know, the stony is the road we trod. We might experience ideological splits, setbacks and mistakes, periodic stagnation. You know what I'm saying? loss of steam, but we will experience major and minor defeat and big and small victories and eventually be triumphant. I believe that, so long as we don't lose our capacity for redemption and restoration and recalibration. That's one of the things that give me hope about Black men.
This is some good soul food. You kings are filling my soul today. I'm getting DMs, people talking about they shout and y'all preaching over here. I'm tempted because my brain is going two different directions, and I know I'm only gonna have time for one more question. And I want to get to this from a selfish standpoint, just because I don't know if you are aware of who I am, but I love all things healing, right? So from my perspective, my question to you is, how does Black masculinity fit into the context of love? You can answer that any way you want to. Love of community, love of self, love of eros love, theological love, whatever context of love. How does Black masculinity fit in the context of love? And if you have time to throw some of Belle's work around love, and that would be helpful too. But yes, from that perspective, how does Black masculinity fit into the context of love?
I'll go first because I have her books, and really. So for me, this is one of her reading. Growing up, we loved the gay men and women in our communities. Many of them were professionals. By today's standards, they would appear closeted because even though everyone knew that they were gay, they did not speak about it openly. It was also evident that male homosexuality was much more widely accepted than lesbianism. Black gay men in the town I grew up in adopted children, usually choosing a child from a family without the means to care for all their kin. These children always had ties of affection and interaction with their biological family, even though they stayed with their adopted kin. They did not become gay, nor did anyone express concern that being around gay folks would be corrupting, an expression of homophobic thinking that has now become more commonplace in Black life. And so as I grew up and I think about that, there were so many people who raised me. As you can see behind me, it's them two parents that born me. And they were my life and my companions for many years until they went on to glory. But when I think about me and my father in the house with my grandmother, my grand aunt, my mother's sister, and my mother, her daughter, we learned at the early age, and I learned this from my father and my mother. We learned how to mutually self-respect and love each other. And we learned how we may be a dysfunctional family, but we learned how to function in love. I never heard my father say a mean word to anybody. Never heard him say it, because he came from the basis of love from my grandmother and my grandfather on that side. I never heard my grandmother on my mother's side say a mean word, even though they were from North Carolina and South Carolina, and they couldn't go outside after dark. I never realized why I had to come in the house when the street lights was on as a young Black gay man. See, my father couldn't go up and walk up the road to his aunt's house because the Ku Klux Klan might catch him and lynch him. And I didn't understand that until I got to history of our history. I couldn't go outside because police might pick me up or shoot me. Just like I couldn't go go to the corner store, like Tayar Mountain in my hoodie, because I might not make it back home. So the reality of love with society giving us the hate we had to counter that in the families, and the godparents and the neighbors and the community. The community, a segregated community in Washington, D.C., when I grew up in the 60s, was the safest place for me. Now, in the 70s and 80s, I could venture out and go to high school in the integrated neighborhoods, and I was the test kids to be first on the buses and to receive all of that. And love always. If I stayed love-based, no matter what hate they threw at me, I had a shield. And I think in her writing, she's talking about that because I had that shield with my Black skin. I had that shield with my sexual orientation. I had that shield with my, immune system being compromised. And now I have a shield with aging. Please don't call me old head. Call me OG. I have to teach the young people, I ain't no old head. I still got plenty of life left here. I mean, but you have to learn that there's a respect. And these are my young brothers and sisters that honor me in one way. And so for me, with self-love, what is old head OG? It's like, it's an acknowledgement from my peeps, my younger. So let me embrace it and all of it, that they are even communicating with me, that I matter as an old head or OG, which is old gangster. So I'll pass that on to Kwame. Iwari, I'm sorry, Iwari.
That's totally fine. Thank you. The one thing that I would say, if I had to sum what I have learned from Bell Hooks about love as a man in this society, is that love is accountability. And that in truth, there is no love absent relationships of accountability. And that, if I had to, when I'm in a room full of young men or old men, regardless of their generation, and we're having a conversation, that's where I begin. And, I don't need to talk about how we as men, as Black men in our Black community, are often given a pass when it comes to what we do, the excuses that we make. And when we get heart to heart, it doesn't take long for us to realize that that is not love. But when we allow ourselves to enter into relationships of accountability with the people who love us, with the people who care for us, and with the people we are responsible to, I'm speaking about even my own children, then we can find love's greatest capacity, which is the ability to grow, the ability to become persons who can then give that love. I would say that in my experiences working with our brothers in our community, that although the one thing we will never be quick to say that we want, yet is the very thing we need, is indeed love. And we know what love feels like. And we know when it feels right. But that in order to receive that, we got to do the work on ourselves to be able to receive it and to know when it's good, and then to be able to give it in return. And that begins with confession. That work begins with confession. Being honest with myself first. I know when I've done wrong. I know when I've hurt someone. And having the capacity to go to that someone, speaking from the heart, not trying to make excuses. This is what it is. This is why, and I'm sorry. Those are the baby steps
from what Bell teaches for us becoming true men. For me, manhood is all about responsibility. It begins and ends with responsibility. How we care for ourselves, how we care for our families, how we care for our communities, and thus finally how we care for this world. With that, I'll pass it to Brother Wright.
Thank you, brother, both of you. And that thing that you said about excuses and all that, that Black men are given passes, and you're right, that's not love, that's called enabling. And that's what we have a lot going on in our community. And it made me laugh when Brother Jeffrey was talking about OG and old head and all that. Man, I found out when I was doing some of my work with Brother Ghani and last year, Ghani with some of the young bulls that we were working with, that we're not even OGs anymore, man. We're UNC. They call OG the 25 and 30-year-olds because they live to be 30. Now think about that for a minute, folks. Us graybeards aren't OGs. The 30-year-old is. We're UNC because of what's going on in our neighborhoods. That pseudo love of giving passes has turned into us attacking ourselves, to us looking outside of ourselves for a solution. And so everything that Brother Aquari said and everything that Brother Jeffrey said resonate with me, because we have to stop looking for others. We have to stop looking externally for solutions that we are responsible for. We are responsible. And so I want a passage, so many passages, but this came out of Bell's Healing the Hurt, page 141. Black men need not prolong their pain while engaging in savior searching. That is, waiting for the Black male leader who will rescue them. In The Heart of the Soul, Gary Zukav and Linda Francis define savior searching as the effort to locate an individual or circumstance that can deliver you from your discomfort. Think about all the things that our young people look for this, not just young people, but our people, trying to mask the pain. They warn that savior searching can take the mundane form of believing you will be transformed by money, fame, education, a perfect mate, job, or automobile. Did she not just kick us in the teeth about being consumers? We are the greatest consumers on the planet Earth. We buy everything we want and can't afford what we need, which is usually free. Many Black males sit around believing they could get it together, if only. The only way to salvation is for Black men to look within, to recognize themselves. Let me say that differently. Let me put the emphasis a little differently. The only way to salvation for Black men to look within, to recognize themselves as the source of their well-being. Everything we need to heal is within us, not outside of us, not in government, not in legislation. And if I could just get spiritual for a moment, the divine never steps in on anything that we can do ourselves. She will support us in all that we do, but we have to step forward. Think about it, whether you're looking at the Quran, whether you're looking at the Bible, whether you're looking at the Torah, look and see where the divine has inserted themselves into human complexities. It's when we took the step forward first The Red Sea don't part if you don't put your toe in the water. You have to take initiative. The Calvary ain't coming. The Calvary is us. We are the Calvary. We're already here, brothers. We're already here. And our sisters have led and led and led, and they've tried over and over again to take a step back. It's okay. Here's the baton. Go get it. Go get it. And what Bell was saying to me in this one book, We Real Cool, is go get it, brothers. Go get it. And to connect with Brother Jeffrey and Brother Uriah said, it's that love ethic that Martin Luther King talked about. That love ethic. How can you, it wasn't a romantic, sentimental love that he had for his enemies. No, that's crazy. That ain't what he was doing. What he was doing was saying, I love myself enough that nonviolent interaction is what's gonna put you where you need to be. And it's gonna put me where I need to be. And so brothers, we have this, we got it. Let's learn from our sisters. Let's learn from our grandmothers. Let's learn from the people who have loved us through it all. And the final thing I'll say for the young bulls that may be watching, I know you're afraid that love is going to make you vulnerable and it's going to make you weak. That's a misnomer. That's not what love does. Showing or having or admitting vulnerability does not make you weak. We can do this, but we have to start with loving ourselves first. That healing that Bell was talking about, brothers, we gotta love ourselves unabashedly, unashamedly, regardless of what we think labels may be placed upon us. When a brother embraces another brother and says, man, I got you. I got you. When we start doing that on the square we're on, I know the world seems big, like we can't do anything about it. We start with the square we're on. And then those squares build. And love begets love begets love. And you be surprised at the strength that is in love. And I think that's what some of these young bulls are afraid of. They're afraid of losing their strength. They're afraid of being vulnerable to admitting that they need somebody. And with that, I'll pass it to Brother Gotti to wrap us up.
Thanks, Doc. Thank you, Uriah and Brother Jeff. You know, I think for me, what resonates, from Bell Hooks about love is how she doesn't separate love from activism, right? And I think I'd like to enter into that point from two quotes, by Bell Hooks. In her view, love isn't about conquest or about dependency on a significant other. It's not, you have so many men and women out there and people out there just looking for the Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or that other person's right, or just looking for more women and more men to conquer or more others to conquer. You know what I'm saying? But Bell Hooks said, quote, knowing how to be solitary is central to the art of loving. When we can be alone, we can be with others without using them as a means of escape, right? And so in there is an analysis. You can find an analysis of how we use this thing called love, right? We call it love, but we use it as an escape from oppression, from misery, from the realities and harshness of Black life in America. You dig what I'm saying? And then we find ourselves in these relationships where we vie for power among the powerless, where the powerless vying for power over each other. You dig what I'm saying? In the name of love, right? But Bell Hooks said, until you can be alone, right? Until you can be by yourself, love yourself first and be in a space, because love isn't how it said two people constantly gazing at one another. Love is two people together looking outward in the same direction, right? Love isn't two people who need each other, right? But two people who, after coming to know each other, choose to be together. They choose to be together because they see that, hey, you know, we're better together than apart. You know, we just like being together. You know what I'm saying? That is an important seed of activism, because it goes into her next, when she takes us on a deeper dive with her next quote, where she says, the moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination, against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. That action is the testimony of love as the practice of freedom, right? So the seed of it is being able to be in your own space, deal with your own demons and stuff, and embrace yourself, right? Love yourself, right? And be with others because you appreciate being with them, right? But not because you need them or you want to conquer them or you want to use them as a means of escape. And once you get to that point, once you get the taste of that love, then the love grows into something bigger, you know, then your love encompasses more, you know, it encompasses beginning to move against bigger domination, bigger forms of oppression, right? It's kind of like another piece, the process of moving from victim to advocate on your own behalf, then to advocate on behalf of others who are suffering from the same issues as you, then to activists on behalf of other issues, then to one who wants to change the system that's generating everyone's issues, is the flowering of a revolutionary. And Che Guevara even talks about how revolutionary is motivated by feelings of love. You dig what I'm saying? And so that for Bell Hooks, I just think that's important for us sitting here so that this conversation can have utility value out in the streets, you know what I'm saying, in our fight to make change, right? Bell Hooks wanted to always keep us centered on that point, whether it's in your personal life, right? If it's real love, it's going to be a love that's not dependent, and it's not based on conquest or escape through another person or over another person, right? And once you experience that, then it grows into a love. Once you choose that kind of love, then it goes into a kind of love that just wants to make bigger change, right? And I would only end with what Cornel West said, which is what my favorite definition of justice, when he said justice is what love looks like in public. You know what I mean? And so if you really have love, right, in your heart, if you really know how to love yourself, your partner, and other people, then you will fight for justice. You'll stand for justice. You dig what I'm saying? It ain't no sitting on, you know, just having love with your partner and you ain't engaged in no issues. You don't have no social responsibility, no ecological responsibility. You ain't getting your ass out there in the streets and trying to change things. You know what I mean? Your love, both you and your partner is going to find your place in the struggle, you know, and I'm speaking to you as somebody that like have committed myself to that, right? So for me, yeah, that's what resonates with me with Bell Hooks, that love is definitely political action as well as it is personal action. Love is revolutionary, and revolution is based on love.
Wow. There is so much power in this conversation. I could literally feel God in this space. I am hyper aware of the presence of the divine, and it is all in this conversation. And so much healing, so much reshaping has taken place just in this hour and 10 minutes that we have been able to talk. I want to leave space for the audience to ask questions and for you all to respond, you know, in that space. But I also want to take this moment for 30 seconds just for us to pause, right? Because I feel this moment, there's pregnancy in this moment, there's thought in this moment. You know, I just want us to take about 30 seconds to think about all that has been shared amongst us while the audience kind of types away at their questions. And we'll come back to it. So let's just take 30 seconds of silence in this moment. So I know some of that is a little strange for many folk to sit in silence, but silence and solitude, solitary connection is how we find remedy. It's how we find the prescription, how we are able to tap into the inward parts of us to create a solution. And God, the divine, however you connect to the divine, is all around you. Sometimes we fill our space with so much speech and language that we get confused and we muddy and conflate things. So much has been said today, and this will be available. The recording will be available and be distributed by Community Health, the Community Health Training Alliance. But I want to say thank you to all of our panelists. Everything that they shared has been invaluable. They have spoken from very compassionate, deep wells of their own humanity and experiences. I like what Dr. Wright said earlier about purpose, right? When we connect to purpose, titles and all of the acquisition-based things we do to make ourselves important, to aggrandize our position in society means nothing, right? And how we connect to our purpose is grounded in love and grounded in the way that we connect to our own fruitfulness. And a lot of times that fruitfulness comes out of the ills of our experiences, out of the very painful places we've gone through. Mr. Songster said the same thing. His experiences in incarceration birthed the greatness within him. As our Reverend Haskins preached us to glory today about the intersections of smashing the box in every area of his life, and our own theologian, Mr. Oseande, has shared about his own experiences with both liberation and his identity as a father and as a Black man in society, has led us to a place where we can examine our own captivity and challenge the ways that we show up and how to reposition ourselves. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for your invaluable contribution. And again, to the Community Health Training Alliance and Philadelphia Fight for this opportunity to interact with these brilliant minds. And I look forward to doing it again. This has to be regular because I don't want this to stop here, but I know I have to. So I'm going to transition over to Dr. Tashina. I don't see any questions from our audience this morning, so I'm going to transition over to Dr. Tashina. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. When I tell you I had moments behind the scene where I welled up in tears, just feeling your strength, feeling the vulnerability, being that transparent really filled my spirit. It made me smile, right? And excitement when we shared stories about sitting at the little table at grandma's house versus the adult table. I said, I remember that. That was very cool. That was mama's house. We had the kids' table and the adult table. And I remember being told as a kid, Jeff, you better come back on this stoop by the time the lights come on in the street. And so I think a lot of learned messaging and wisdom that has transcended from our parents and just from their experiences that taught us and shaped us and how we navigate this life. And so I was also receiving text messages like, is this being recorded? OMG, this is so good. I'm like, absolutely. I got so excited, guys, that I was even in the chat talking to you guys. Yes, yes. Because I think this is a conversation that we don't have often enough. And so I thank you for your willingness to give of your time to share from a deep place, an honest place. So that those who are listening can also reshape their thinking of how they see Black men, Blackness, masculinity, and even challenging their own bias towards Black men. And so I thank you for sharing of your experiences and all of that. And to Tiara, sis, I love how you moderated this session. I love the questions. I love your tender touch and approach to these questions so that you were able to create a space for everyone to share and feel comfortable. And so on that, since there isn't any more questions, at the end of our webinar series, at the end of February, you all will have access to all of the recorded videos for our Black History webinar series. Stay tuned for next week. We have our final webinar series. You don't want to miss that. These are two amazing women hailing from South Carolina, from an organization called Speaking Down Barriers. And so they are going to share from a place of their own vulnerability as women and raising sons. And so you don't want to miss that. Please register if you have time after today's presentation. And so on that note, someone else says that, yeah, I think it was great that I think everyone enjoyed, and I'm sure I can speak for the audience, if there was any questions or reflections you may have about your experience for today's presentation. It would be great to hear from you. But yeah, fellas, thank you, thank you, thank you. If I could hug you, I would, each, every one of you. While you guys were talking also, I heard a couple of references to Bell Hooks books, and I have one called here, All About Love. Right. If those of you in the audience are familiar with this book, it's a great book. I didn't finish it, but it's a great book in terms of her perspective of love that Jeff was also referencing and reading. And I believe, Brother Ure, you mentioned about the burden of strength, too heavy a yoke. Well, I think it was Dr. Wright that mentioned it. Yes, this is a good book. It really, for us Black women, this is a must read. It definitely caused me to take a step back and say, oh my gosh, this is powerful, but also shaped my thinking of how I viewed and approached and embraced strength as a Black woman. And so again, thank you all. There isn't any questions or reflections in the chat box, in the Q&A box. And so on that, I'm going to end the webinar. And so for all of you watching, see you guys next week, and you enjoy the rest of your day. To the panelists, I'll be in touch with you all shortly. Thank you all. Bye.